want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Lance Velchek here for Arrow in the Head's The Fucking Black Sheep, where we take a look at the opposing opinion of the genre's most divisive films. Around 18 years ago, I sat in a crowded theater in Chicago Heights and experienced one of my favorite superhero films that oddly enough was sold as a mystery thriller, as comic book films were still a niche market. Oh, how times have changed. Back when Bruce Willis gave a shit and M. Night Shyamalan was the next Spielberg. That's right. I'm talking about Unbreakable. Now there were talks of a sequel, but nothing ever came from it. M. Night moved on, and so did we. So now many years later, we finally get a continuation to David Dunn's story, while also serving as a sequel to Split. This perfect mashup is Glass. Since Unbreakable was a more gritty and grounded take on the superhero movie, I'd like to look back and dissect an underrated, before its time, comic book film. Let's dive into Zack Snyder's Watchmen. Adaptations are a tough thing to balance. Stray too far and you lose the point. But if you just go through the motions, you risk a heartless and stale transfer. There really isn't a universal blueprint on how to do it right. Which brings me to Watchmen, a comic series for comic fans, yet it was so incredibly smart and expertly executed, it ended up transcending its own medium, winning multiple awards and turning the comic formula on its head. It just might be the gold standard. I own the graphic novel and was blown away by it, but my introduction to it, I'm only aware of it because of the film, and so I don't have a history and an upbringing with the Watchmen series. And because of that, I don't have an interest in comparing the comic to the film. Look, I know it would be impossible to completely separate the movie from its original source, but I want to defend and explore this film on its own terms. Set in an alternate version of 1985 America, the Cold War has intensified and mankind is on the brink of extinction. This is a world where superheroes exist and were eventually outlawed. The murder of a first-generation crime fighter leads to a series of events which brings the Watchmen out of retirement. And that's basically the plot, and me trying to be as professional and vague as possible. It's been out for about 10 years, and though I shouldn't have to warn for spoilers, go watch this movie if you haven't already seen it. For the rest, here we go. Watchmen is tonally perfect. Tone is described as a film's flavor. It's more than just its visual aesthetic, but a combination of its personality, sound, and vision. In its first 11 minutes, Watchmen sets the mood, the style, and the story better than the majority of superhero films today. The opening credits may be the best, if not one of the best ever. We get a detailed history of the rise of the superhero, their role in changing historical events, and the eventual government ban. With the perfect use of slow motion and leaning into the vintage pulp comic look, you immediately understand this reality. Edward Blake's The Comedian was shown to have killed Kennedy. Ozymandias meets Bowie outside the Cocaine Palace.
What happened? Bowie,
All this without the need for dialogue, just beautifully transitioned scenes with the best use of Bob Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changin'. The comedian's death is a catalyst for the story. His effect on our main characters set up and flesh out their differences. Dr. Manhattan lets Blake kill his pregnant fling, showing Manhattan's growing an interest in our pesky species. Night Owl 2 realizes his idealism of justice in the American way has been corrupted and that he may be a part of the problem. Blake literally burns Adrian's plans, insults him for thinking a team can ever make a real difference, which pushes Ozymandias into his master stroke. I don't agree that the Rorschach character glorifies violence. Come on. As the closest character we get to an actual lead, he is naturally cool. He's a vengeful man in a trench coat with an ever-changing mask. But we are never tricked into thinking Rorschach is an actual hero. One of his first lines from his journal,
"And all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, 'Save us.' And I'll whisper, 'No.'"
He's not here to help who he deems undeserving. He tortures Moloch, a reformed villain, and clearly wants to bust him for a small amount of narcotics. He wants to look into Adrian's sexuality as he suspects he may be gay. And then there's the murder. Now, I still cheer when he takes out this murdering pedophile, and if I was in the jury, odd 12 angry men him to freedom. But to say Walter Kovacs is an anti-hero would be far, far too kind. The comedian would be the villain in any superhero film today, or he would if most had interesting villains. Again, murders pregnant women, tries his hand at rape, and this. Night Owl 2 is the only real decent guy, and his loss of purpose after masked vigilantes were banned basically emasculated him.
Oh, hell.
He can't even get it up until he gets back to the rush of saving lives. These are flawed men. These are complex heroes with imperfect motives and questionable morals. I know that the heightened strength and speed were problematic for some, but it gives this surreal world its own identity. Nixon has abolished term limits, and Archie isn't quite plausible in 1985, but it gives this a very unique comic book feel. Here it's a mix of a real gritty world with the out-of-bounds superhero antics. This isn't a completely grounded reality. That would be The Dark Knight. This is just a car chase with rocket launchers. Trust me. I drive this every morning and I always think,
well, this is definitely Lower Wacker Drive.
When the comedian punches the wall, or Dan and Lori kick the shit out of these gangbangers, I don't feel like they have powers unattainable to others in this world. This is just world building in action. Dan follows a Night Owl's footsteps, and Lori joins crime fighting because it's sort of the family business. With the heroes passing the baton, as you will, I assume there would be training. If these heightened senses are everywhere, or at least attainable, then they are not really super powered, except for Adrian. And no reflex training in the world can help you catch a bullet. Watchmen's most important story thread is how one saves the world.
If Adrian and I can solve the energy crisis, war may be averted.
It's the end result of actions having consequences that separate this story from most. The portrayal of Manhattan is absolutely brilliant. As the only actual superhero, we essentially get a god.
I tell her I don't think there is a god. And if there is, I'm nothing like him.
Trying to help a world he really has no more connection to besides Lori. Billy Crudup plays a man with an understanding of life far beyond anything we can comprehend. A simple man with apathy and empathy perfectly balanced. His voice, calm, soft, and reassuring, like how one would speak to a child.
If only you could perceive time as I do.
It's perfect. As he explains, time is scattered, simultaneous.
The rest is confetti.
Damn right now. We get his story presented in a beautiful, scattered, non-linear way. It's this visual representation that John, Dr. Manhattan, understands life on a level we could never. Basically disproving free will. It's dark stuff. Adrian uses this knowledge to block his sight. The energy source he was working on was a bomb with Manhattan's energy signature, and his final play. Actions have consequences, and the murder of millions
To save billions.
will always be one of my favorite endings. No saving the world in the nick of time, no changing the past. Here, millions will die, women, children, honest men, all dead, but dead for the greater good, without condoning or condemning.
I understand.
And as pragmatic and cold as this decision was, I love that Adrian ends it with the acknowledgement of the pain that it will cause, and how he won't shy away from it.
I've made myself feel every day. See every innocent face I've murdered to save humanity.
But with Rorschach unwilling to compromise, we get the last death needed to keep the peace. I'm not the first to say it, but Jackie Earle Haley is fantastic in the role as Walter Kovacs. The entire movie he delivers his dialogue in an inward grunt. Confident but never open. His sentences are fractured and he never loses his manner of speaking.
I heard a joke once.
Probably true. Obvious, really.
Must stop him. Kill Blake, kill millions.
Wait here.
But it's here, it's this subtle change, when he realizes this is his end. He begs for it to be over, and as his lip quivers and his face contorts, his last request, do it, is not from Rorschach, but from Walter. His tone is hopeless, and for a brief moment his guard is down. It's f***ing perfect. Many argue that Snyder's version missed the point, and maybe. I don't really care though. Blade Runner missed the point of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but still made its own beautiful little story. Watchmen is an adult-themed film about tough choices from flawed and corrupt men, set in a dark, pessimistic world that has more bearing today than it did back then. Somewhat nihilistic, I'd argue like the comic series, it was ahead of its time. Kill millions to save billions. What really matters is how you judge the film on the tale that's being told, and what you get out of it. To sum up the tone, the world of Watchmen and its poignant ending, where Dan loses his brother in arms, I'd like to quote the late Charles Bradley, because life is full of sorrow, heartaches, and pain.
Your brother is gone.
Rorschach's Journal, October 12th, 1985. Tonight, a comedian died in New York.